All right. Welcome to this week's live office hours. I'm finally getting over some sickness finally today. So I was hoping we wouldn't have to cancel uh, and gearing up for a Proven Conference. So a bunch of swags arriving tomorrow, I believe, that will be given out at the event. A lot of planning on our part, which is going to be exciting. Yeah, just a lot. I feel like, you have a month or so to plan, and then it's like, oh, cool, it's next weekend.
Yeah.
And you got to move super, super fast, which is always fun. But no, super excited. I know we've been talking about Proven Conference kind of leading up to it. We did just sponsor and confirm sponsorship for AMZ United. So we'll be there in New Jersey. I believe that's in August. So we'll be there as well. We'll actually be speaking, which is pretty exciting. Pretty large crowd. So that'll be nerve wracking for me. But very, very pumped. Casey, anything that's top of mind for you?
No, I think Proven Conference seems to be top of mind for all of us right now. I was talking to a couple friends yesterday, and it seems like we went from February to May, like March and April kind of just evaporated into thin air. But yeah, I won't be in attendance at the Proven Conference, but any of you folks feel free to come into chat and tell me how things are going, and I would love to hear that. But yeah, hopefully getting out to some conferences in the next 12 months or so. And yeah, it should be fun for some of our faces to get out there and just start to see and be with the people a little bit.
Yeah, it's going to be awesome. We might have to postpone next week's office hours because I will be driving to Orlando that day and setting up for the event. But yeah, it should be good. Yeah, it does feel like time's flying. I know we talk about this a lot because it really just is. We're already talking about, I think last week we talked about prepping for Q4 already. It's a lot, which is super exciting because it means we're getting closer and closer to like what we call the Amazon selling Super Bowl, right? Like it's just going to be insane. And then following that is Returnary, which is just going to be depressing, which is how sellers love to start the new year with a bunch of returns, which hopefully, can get cut back next year. But yeah, 2025 is already upon us, which is actually crazy. I say upon us like it's next month, but it feels as if our rate of speed is really, really insane. So it's pretty nuts here. Let's see, or next upgrade 2029. Definitely got more updates coming for you on the center side. One thing I will say is since our 1.0 release, which took 18-ish months to rebuild the platform from the ground up, we've been way more consistent about getting new features out, bug fixes, all these good things. We're doing a ton operationally too, with content, things like this, like office hours. We got a bunch of stuff kind of in the woodworks right now that we're working on, both on the content and kind of community side of things, as well as product, of course. So a lot of things happening right now. So hopefully, I want to say in the next few months, we'll have a major announcement that will be exciting to share. So definitely working on a ton, which is pretty fun. It's tough trying to find that balance between working on these massive new things that just take a ton of time and a ton of headspace and like a lot of like learning and figuring things out as you go, and like the smaller kind of quality of life things that we ship. It's kind of tough sometimes, sometimes we just have to take a week and say, cool, this week it's just quality of life stuff. We're going to put a pause on the big moving things for a period of time, get some of these smaller things out. That will be good. Gunji, does next few months mean 2 months or 10 months? Next few months would be probably closer between 2 to 3. So if a couple's 2, I say a few, it's like somewhere around 2 to 3, maybe 4 because it's software and things always take longer than you anticipate. Definitely not 10 months. I can for sure say that. What's the Elon Musk meme where it's like you just add a multiple onto whatever date he says or whatever time frame he says, which is kind of funny because like in software you do this too, right? This is like a best practices thing for internal teams where you say, cool, like we're going to build this thing. Great. How long is it going to take? 2 weeks. Awesome. We're going to assume 4, and we're going to assume it's going to take twice as long, as well as it's going to cost twice the amount of money to build this thing. It's just a good rule of thumb because as it turns out, humans are horrible at doing estimation. We try to get as good as we can. I know like in the agile scrum kind of world, you have these estimation points, and it's funny because everybody tries to create their own little algorithms for how to do estimations and nobody gets it right. It's maybe right 60% of the time, and that's being probably aggressive and very friendly to the people doing it. But we don't do estimates in that strict sense because you can't back it with data. I guess you can back with how wrong you've been. That's one thing you can do. You can always go back and be like, cool, this is double what we thought. But good rule of thumb, we tend to just assume double what we think it's going to take. So welcome to software. Everybody thinks it's just writing code. Actually, there's a lot more that goes into it. Writing the code is the easy part, which is so funny to me. It's conceptually understanding and designing like the system itself. How do things work? How do you make sure that it can scale really far? Like there's so many edge cases you have to think through before you even start writing code. And so when, software companies in our space are like, oh, we have X number of developers, I'm like, that I could care less. Like writing the code's the easy part. Like you need somebody who understands systems design, all these crazy intricate things, algorithms. Like anybody can, not anybody, most people like can sit down and learn how to write code, but that doesn't make you necessarily a software engineer, which is why we hire software engineers, not developers. Very different class of human being is what I'll say. See, Kunji, what next podcast are you going to be on? Oh, good question. I am recording, let me check calendar because I live by it and I jump around so much. I am recording, let's see, I was supposed to have one yesterday that actually got rescheduled. I'm doing one in a private Discord. I do a lot of private Discord stuff lately, actually. I am recording one with Getida. So I will be hosting Getida, diving deep into what Getida does, because I'm actually really excited about this. So we're creating some content with them. I'll be recording that on Monday. And then I leave Wednesday to go to the Proven Conference for the weekend in Orlando. So that's all that. And I probably have a few of the weeks after. We actually just wrapped up a ton. So I know Finn on our team just recorded an in-depth strategy building podcast, webinar, whatever you want to call it, video basically with Chris Grant that's coming out in the coming weeks. The videos I just did with Reezy, Resells went live, with Pete Flips and Nick Spizik went live, and Dylan Sawyer. So I actually drove up to Savannah in person. We got to record a hangout. That was really fun. Those all got released last Friday. So I kind of went ham back to back. They all got released on Friday, and now I feel empty inside because I don't have as many scheduled ready to go. But yeah, it's funny how things crop up, because a lot of times it's like, hey, can you do it tonight? I'm like, yeah, sure. So that changes a lot of times in 48 hours. So I can't tell you the exact next one I will be on or the exact next one that will go live. I know there's still a handful, I think, that are being edited by the other teams. So they kind of get trickled out at random times. I recorded one that I think is going live in June. So, take it with a grain of salt. But hopefully we'll have some new stuff for you here shortly. I know we're doing a lot of content on our end. I love being able to jump on other people's channels and share and educate and geek out, but we're also wanting to return that favor and say, cool, like I want to have an in-depth discussion. I want to keep learning myself, with other tools and people. So like Getida, I'm really pumped to have them come on and record something awesome. Let's see, Abe, apart from repricing, does your company have other products in making or launch for Amazon sellers? So right now it's just Amazon repricing. We do have VinDriveCRM.com. That was our first software that we actually created. We don't really support it anymore. There's still a handful of users that use it, and that's it. We are working on some really cool stuff in stealth mode that I cannot tell you about, hence my, forward-leaning conversation comment that is in a few months we have something cool to share with everyone. Can't share now, but yeah, that's mainly what we work on right now. Great questions, though. Love these. Keep these questions coming. Again, this is open office hour, so there's no real set agenda here. It's really just a time for anybody to jump in, ask questions either about repricing, about or the product, about us as a company, about just general selling things. We love diving deep into different topics. So whatever you have, throw it into the comment section. We're happy to answer those. Any feedback you have as well, good and bad. We definitely want to hear it all. So if you have positive feedback, share that. If you have negative, also share that as well. If you have feature requests, things of that nature, we would love to see those. See, James, great question here. Does Aura have a feature for business pricing on Amazon? Not right now. That is a feature request. If you go to feedback.goaura.com, and I'll put this up for everyone to see. You can go, if you want this and you have not voted on it yet, go ahead and search. If it's there, upvote it. If it's not there, go ahead and add it for us. That way it's always linked to you as the individual. So whenever we start to work on something, you get a notification to say, hey, we're working on this, or hey, it's planned, it's underway, it's finished, all that good stuff. And of course, it also lets us know, hey, like you specifically want this. maybe we need to reach out and ask you a few questions. Maybe we want you specifically to beta test some things. So it kind of gives us a nice context for who to talk to on certain things. But yeah, not right now. Great question, though. Awesome. So Casey, any major patterns you've been noticing in sellers and what they've been struggling with lately?
I've definitely seen a few instances of Amazon prioritizing themselves in the buy box, which is always fun.
Yes.
Not many things that can be done about that, unfortunately. Obviously, we know Amazon kind of just determines the buy box. We know it's some kind of combination of price, shipping, and seller rating, but we don't really know which they factor the most out of those things. We typically believe it's price. Obviously, there's instances where someone will have a better price and better shipping and an almost the same rating, and they're not put in there. So, no real consistencies there yet. So I haven't been able to hypothesize as to any specific details about their determinations there. So that's one thing. And then definitely seeing some more people take advantage of our integrations for getting their costs in, which definitely helps automate some things in the platform. If you don't know already, we currently integrate with Inventory Lab, Restock Pro, and ScanPower. So those are all great tools. Inventory Lab will sync once every 24 hours. ScanPower and Restock Pro, I believe, are somewhere around like the 10 to 15 minute mark. So just about live. But yeah, definitely seeing a lot more folks come in and get set up. Enjoy getting those folks on the early stage program set up with some strategy recommendations. So yeah, kind of the typical mix of setup questions, trying to get in the buy box, maximize margins with Maven. So kind of a typical spread of things. No real patterns really emerging in the last month or so.
Well, it's funny. I'm glad you brought up the Amazon thing, because this really highlights what we do in the difficulty of it, right? It really is a black box. There is no, here's how it works. And so we have to run a bunch of testing to understand what is happening. How is that changing? And this was like our whole push into Maven, right? It's like, I can guarantee that things will change, but I can't guarantee what things will change. And so if we start to take a step back and say, well, what if we build a more flexible model that could work better in these unknown scenarios? Would that lend itself to better performance? And it turns out it does. Now, there are cases where, and you brought this up, Amazon, right? On some listings, they'll let you compete and they'll let you win. They'll let you completely destroy it. They'll let you conquer it. On other listings, on the flip side of that spectrum, complete opposite end of that spectrum, they won't let you own it, period. You can have the best price. You can be $30 below the buy box, amazing, everything. And they're like, no, we own this. My theory is they do this based on inventory. So how much inventory that they have. So if they have so much and like, okay, this is, locking up too much capital, we need to move through it, they're going to own the buy box. It's the same thing that sellers do, right? Sellers just take advantage of that process by lowering their pricing. But Amazon can just go into the back end and be like, we own it. Great. So like they, if we could do that as a repricer, oh my gosh, that'd be amazing. Obviously that will never occur. But so because we don't know what Amazon will allow behaviorally, and because it's so variant, meaning it changes so much, what can we do? Well, what we can do is we can run some experiments, right? We can test a few things. So we can say, okay, well, it's Amazon. Let's match. Did we rotate the buy box? No. Okay, well, let's go down one penny. Did we pull the buy box? No. Okay, so they're being a little bit more uncooperative here. Because sometimes you can pull it $5 beneath the buy box. Other times you can't pull it, period. But if you don't attempt, then you don't find that $5, right? And what you don't want to do is default to a 5 when you could have matched. And so the hard part is designing the system so that it can understand, okay, let's try in the best ideal case, see if that's true. If that's not true, let's kind of go deeper and let's go deeper until we find out what actually works. And what's nice is that's specific to Amazon, right? So if that changes for whatever reason, Amazon sells out or they change their behavior, great, we can react to that immediately in real time. And it's so important because, I've said this countless times, and I think this does apply to Amazon in some way, shape, or form. Every seller's in basically the same life cycle, right? You come in very conservative on your pricing because profit margin makes the most sense here. As time goes on, you become more aggressive with your pricing. Why? Because long-term storage fees become a thing. opportunity cost becomes a thing. You need your capital to be churning. Now, there's a give and take there, right? You don't want to churn it too fast, but you don't want to churn it too slow. Every one of your competitors is in the same life cycle that you are. Now, every time you replenish your inventory, you restart that life cycle, right? You just start back up here. Amazon's kind of in a similar boat, right? Because this is more of a foundational concept in business and e-commerce. So is it probable that Amazon would follow a similar kind of concept where they say, if we hold things too longer, we bought too much inventory, we need to get rid of it? Yeah, actually, that makes a ton of sense. So it is also likely that just because they're not allowing you to compete now does not mean that they won't allow you to compete in the near future. This is why it's important for the model like Maven to be able to understand, oh, things just changed. Okay, cool. Let's readapt. Let's reassess. And a lot of what role-based strategies are doing is requiring you to understand what are the patterns, what changed. And it's really hard, right? It's really hard for an individual person to look at 500 something SKUs and be like, cool, what changed here? Like, not everything is as evident in the data that you get to see, but it is very evident in the data that we see via the API as developers. And so we can take advantage of that and kind of be like, all right, cool, something changed. We need to react to that in real time, versus hoping that you stumble upon those changes and make the right decision.
Yeah, and that is one thing that is nice about the rules-based strategy, specifically like the buy box. You can be like, hey, if Amazon's in the buy box, maybe I don't want to match them, or maybe I don't want to price below them because I know I have a lower chance of winning that buy box. So it does give you the option to price above them at a certain level or rate or whatever metric you determine is most effective. But obviously, Maven kind of automatically handles those complications, and it's not going to be as rigid as like, hey, you're going to be pricing above by 15 or 25 cents. Maven's going to determine what that best or what that difference should be that's going to be most effective. And it's going to be more fluent, more intelligent, learning in real time. So yeah, as we know, each strategy is not always the best for all listings, but having some sort of healthy split definitely leads to the best performance within the platform.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you kind of want to take like a portfolio approach to a certain degree. See, good question here. Will you ever make a spot to input prep costs and or FBM costs to your total costs rather than having to manually add that to the cost tab? Yes. So again, feedback.goer.com. We actually have that there. That's something we're looking at. Go ahead and upvote so you get notifications for whenever that changes. This is, I think, becoming more and more of a thing over the past few years. It's funny, when we first built Aura, Legacy Aura, nobody did merchant fulfilled. Like, it was never worth it. And then that kind of changed during COVID. And a lot of people were like, I can actually make a lot more money here. This is pretty good. And prep centers just became ubiquitous, right? Prep centers have always existed for the most part, but they've just become more accessible. You have more options for prep centers. A lot of them are operating at a better quality kind of way, if that makes sense. There's a lot of shady characters, and there still certainly are shady ones. That's why we built prepcenter.com, to kind of highlight these things, to put some kind of scoring feedback system into the industry to say, this is somebody you should avoid. This is a company that does not operate well, or this is an amazing company. You should absolutely work with them. So I see this in a few different lights. I know we talked about this a handful of times over the last few months, but one, being able to bulk add a prep cost per unit to all your SKUs. So maybe this is like in the settings as an example, where you just say, on average, I pay $1 per unit in prep. Great. Just assign that automatically to everything. Gotcha. That's one input filled versus like 1,000 if you have 1,000 SKUs. The other version of this is specific to the SKU, right? So merchant fulfill cost. So having this concept of an additional cost that can be applied either which way, right? You can apply it in bulk, so one to many or one to one. So definitely something we're heavily looking at. I think it's cool personally, because it just, again, as accurate as we can get data, the better we can factor things in. And what's nice too is if you're able to do these things in bulk, let's say your prep cost went up 25 cents, great, you change it in one place and you're done here. The hard thing, I think, is going to be for sellers on the merchant fulfilled cost side of things, like merchant fulfilled shipping for each individual SKU. It's going to be kind of time consuming. So I am trying to think, how do we design that in a way that is less time consuming, but at the end of the day, we kind of just have to put it in. Like, you just have to input that. And I don't think there's an integration we can pull that from necessarily. Yeah, I'm trying to think, maybe there is something. Because if we could just import that automatically, that'd be amazing. Now, there's also some different versions of this where you say, I'm going to give you a per poundage assumption. We take the per pound and multiply it by whatever value you want to give, right? Like the proverbial, like 50 cents per pound for FBA inbound. Is there something we could do there? Is it consistent enough for Merchant Fulfilled to be able to do that? Or is that average going to vary basically too much? Or right. So can we scale that in a way that's simplistic for the end user, or does it really need to be as individual because there's so much variance in each individual SKU, which I think is really going to be the case, unfortunately. Let's see. Kunji has a cool example here. Could you take the average FBM cost calculated, pulled from Inventory Lab or whatever connection? Maybe. That's something I want to look into. Let's see. Average for that specific ASIN. Could it be pulled in? I don't know off the top of my head. That's why I'll have to take a look, because we haven't attempted to do that via any integrations yet. So we'll take a look, see. Maybe there's something there we could make this a little bit better with. Keep these questions coming, by the way. These are really good, thought-provoking questions, covering some stuff that's already on the roadmap, which is very exciting for us. I like getting new stuff, certainly, but when there's a overpouring of just like, hey, like we really want this, I'm like, awesome. It tells us exactly what to work on next. So it's super helpful for us.
Yeah, it makes it easier to prioritize some of that stuff. Like you said, it's a balance between making big improvements and then smaller improvements that will immediately help folks and trying to figure out what that is. So yeah, always upvote or go to that feedback link so that can help us point us in the right direction there.
Exactly. I'm not sure if you noticed, but OpenAI just released a brand new model. It's pretty exciting. It is called GPT-4o, and O stands for Omni, because now it's a multimodal model, meaning it's one model and it can handle text, audio, and video, or images, technically.
Interesting.
Really cool, because if you ever watched the movie Her, and I know you're a film guy, so I know you've seen it. Yeah, you've seen it. I watch it once a week because I'm like, we're so close. The meme right now is that we just built Her, like Samantha from Her. At least the audio interaction, it's not doing the I'm in your system files, can do, manage your email quite yet. But they're doing something that's really cool, which is real-time streaming of the output of the audio and the input of the audio, meaning it's crazy fast. And what they did, which is really cool for developers, if you swap out, you use this new model, it's twice as fast and half the cost. I want people to think about this. A bunch of developers who have built software on top of these language models just swapped out one character in their code, and now their system's twice as fast and half the cost. I want people to think about why this matters, because the rate of change that is occurring right now is actually incredibly high, and the cost is coming down, right? So we're getting better performance at a lower price point as developers. What this translates to is things that were cost prohibitive to build as a developer possibly no longer are, or will not be in the next 3 to 6 months. So all the crazy ideas that we have where it's like, oh, it'd be awesome if we could do this. And it's like, yeah, but it's really slow and it costs so much money. Well, what happens when both those things change, and they're changing rapidly? This was actually a relatively small announcement by OpenAI. I think it was on Monday. Apparently there's going to be another larger announcement coming later this week. That's the rumor. We'll see. But these things are happening very quickly, and it's going to enable incredible functionality. Like internally, we're talking about testing some new tooling for customer support, and they use GPT-4, and the way it's priced, it's kind of expensive. Well, they could change one thing out. It could be twice as fast and half the price point, in which case it makes it immediately more interesting to consider, is what I will say. So it's pretty exciting stuff. I will say that. Let's see. DeFam, do we have the video to walk through for Aura repricing? Yes. So actually, whenever you start your trial, you'll get an email that contains a bunch of these things. Casey's actually putting together a bunch more of these isolated videos of less than 5 minutes. Here's how to do X. Here's how to do Y. Here's how to do Z. And if you haven't already, go ahead and schedule an onboarding session. Just reach out to support and request that. It's 20-ish minutes, doesn't take super long. We'll send you a schedule linkage on the calendar, on the schedule there. It will walk you through the whole product, answer any questions you have in real time, which is, I think, far better than a video, although the videos Casey's producing right now are phenomenal. So by the way, thank you for doing that. But Casey, anything you want to add on to that specifically?
Yeah, I would just really kind of pile on what Dylan said. I am working on making more how-to/setup videos to make sure you folks can get set up as quickly as possible, kind of eliminate any of those initial questions or hesitations that you may have. As of now, Finn is running our onboarding calls, and the next 2, maybe 3 weeks max, I'll also be starting to run onboarding calls, so there'll be more availability for that. And if you are looking for just a walkthrough and you can't find that in any of the emails Dylan mentioned, feel free to ping us in that chat. Right now, Finn's running chat. I'll be back on it this afternoon, but we can send you that video directly, and it is just a video of Dylan kind of walking through the Aura 1.0 platform, making sure that all the different areas are kind of explained at a high level to give you that initial understanding. So yeah, we will have more video content soon, but always feel free to reach out to us in the chat or via email at hello@goaura.com, and we'll be able to send you some stuff there.
Nice. See, Sam, following up on the prep costs as an additional cost being factored in this new feature request, which we love. So yeah, once that basically add $1.25 to each item in COGS, because I cannot utilize a strategy like 25% min, because that is inconsistent across the board and not near actually 25%. So Casey, I know you have a pretty good recommendation for like a workaround here of basically like raising that minimum value by some kind of percentage, whether that's 5, 10, 15%, just to like in the near term, be able to kind of factor those things in.
Yeah, so essentially what you can do if you don't want to constantly update those costs with whatever it is, whether it's a prep cost, maybe it's an FBM shipping cost, what we'll see some users do, Sam, is kind of automatically increase that minimum ROI that they're using to be calculated in their strategies. Just adding an additional percentage on there to factor in. So if you wanted to be 25% min, like in your example, maybe set it at that 27, 28% min, just to kind of factor in for any additional fees that may not actually be in your cost field. That tends to be the quickest and most effective workaround until we do have some sort of additional fields for adding in those costs, or until we release more integrations for that to be more automated for you as well.
Yeah. Nice. See, in which case that we should use Maven, in which case should we use role-based? Yeah, great question here. So the way we recommend this is you default to using Maven because it's going to require a lot less work from you as the end user and will handle far more scenarios, give you better performance without you really having to understand strategies and stuff like that. However, Maven doesn't work. I don't think any strategy will work 100% across your listings. That's just a really difficult thing to do. So what I would say is default to Maven. If you're not seeing amazing results like you would expect, what I would first recommend is look at your min prices first. Because what a lot of people do is that they translate their min values from the rule-based to Maven, and that doesn't really translate well. What I mean by that is if you're used to setting 30% minimum ROI with rule-based and you do that with Maven, it can actually hold Maven back a little bit. Because sometimes we need to go down to go up, right? A lot of what we do is counterintuitive. And so what we've noticed, and I've tested this a lot with users, when they transition 100% from role-based to Maven, as an example, you know, holding that 30% ROI for a continued example here, we tend to not see amazing performance. But whenever we lower that minimum by half, right? So we take it from 30% to 15% ROI, we tend to see the performance go up. That does not mean that we're lowering the margin. Actually, the margin ends up going up. It's just that we have to be able to well position ourselves and be strategic. So first, do that. Then, in a lot of cases, you know, you have these exceptional situations that you need a very specifically designed strategy that's like fixed, meaning like rule-based, right? It's going to explicitly do what you tell it to. In those cases, that's when you fall back onto rule-based. So I tend to say, start with Maven, fall back on rule-based whenever you need that. A good example here is a liquidation strategy. Maven's not going to liquidate. It's not designed to do that. It's not going to take your pricings. Won't do it. Now, sometimes you need to do that though, right? Sometimes you need to liquidate. So that's when I would say, and we have documentation on how to do this, how to build specifically a liquidation strategy. That's when I would say, go to rule-based. But Casey, anything you want to add on to that?
Yeah, my general recommendation is Maven is designed to find that optimal price by using a combo of margin and sales velocity. Though it does take into account sales velocity, it does tend to favor the margin side of things. The sales velocity portion is just so that it doesn't price you at your max. Obviously, that would be the best margin, but sales velocity wouldn't be factored in there.
Yep.
So Maven typically does find that optimal price, and we found that more often than not, that optimal price is actually above the current buy box price. So my typical recommendation is if your primary focus is to get the buy box or is sales velocity, I do typically recommend our buy box targeting strategy or some iteration of a rules-based strategy for that. If you are more so focused on margin, then that's going to be where you're going to want to use Maven. It does take Maven maybe a couple days to kind of settle into the pricing range that it determines best just by collecting that data on a listing and figuring out where that optimal price point is going to be. So that's generally at a high level my recommendations there. If sales velocity or the buy box is your main focus, use the buy box targeting strategy. If you're trying to just maximize that margin, you're going to want to use Maven.
Yeah, perfect. Let's see. Follow up here. Actually, new question. So if you set your minimum and leave the max empty for Maven, do you run the risk of a race to the bottom? So you don't. This is what's really cool, especially using Maven. Now, if you use rule base and you design it to do that, then yes. Maven, again, what Casey was just saying, it's designed to find that optimal price. Optimal price, how we define it, is the balance between sales velocity and profitability. There's a massive equation on how we get there. Now, what's interesting is the optimal price tends to be above the buy box. Well, why? If you think about it from an economics perspective, you have a lot of competition. What happens to your price? It gets a lot of downward pressure. So we're actually trying to relieve that pressure, if it is like a good way to think about it. So we use the minimum value to know the lower end, right? The floor here. That doesn't mean we're going there. This is so important. A lot of repricing tools are designed that way. Unfortunately, I think what ends up happening is you have, again, there's a difference between a software engineer and a developer. A developer is somebody who you say, build this, and they go, cool, I'm going to build exactly what you tell me to build. There's not enough high level thought put into, is this the right decision? How does this algorithm actually perform? And so what ends up happening is, and we've talked about this, I released a blog post this past Monday on how we need to redefine how we measure success for repricing, because a lot of what has historically been done is we say my buy box ownership went up or my sales went up. Is that good? Not necessarily, because your margin could have gone to crap, right? And both those things are easy to manipulate. I just lower your price and both those things went up. But are you happy? Not really. So what can happen is you have these development teams, especially outsourced development teams in China and India and Ukraine, which is what's common in our space. What they do is not being very thought through, right? So they design something and they go, cool, well, the buy box percentage went up, success. No, like not necessarily. This is the key importance of one of the reasons why we don't outsource work. We have an internal team, actual software engineers, like highly trained, like bachelor's, master's degrees in computer science, like they are computer scientists, because they can think through rationally, logically, does this make sense? And so this is super important. So Maven's not designed to do that. So that's what's great, is like actually by design, no. That's why I keep saying when somebody's like, well, I need to liquidate, great, don't use Maven. If Maven did that, I would definitely recommend you to use Maven for it, but it doesn't. And that's great. So you won't have that fear. We actually recommend exactly what you're doing here, which is you're automatically setting your minimums using ROI, profit margin, fixed profit, whatever makes sense for you there. That's allowing you to automate a ton of work and then leave the max empty, so we can do that for you. We can dynamically adjust it up and down as the market itself changes, because it should. Because unfortunately, what happens is a lot of people try to manually set their max prices because they want that control. And unfortunately, you always set it too low or too high. And yes, setting it too high actually causes problems. And so we need to understand what's the realistic upper bounds here and how is that fluctuating and changing. And we can utilize that information to make strategic pricing decisions that can increase margin. Super important. So when you look on Twitter or whatever, and you see prices being sold higher than the buy box, this is why that's occurring, because we have that concept of the optimal price as well as that max price, letting us know where we can and can't go. So super important. See you. Yeah. So if anybody wants an onboarding session, just reach out to support, a little chat, or you can email hello@goaura.com. That comes to the same inbox, and just say, hey, I'd love to schedule an onboarding session. We'll shoot you a Calendly link or a cal.com link, and get you taken care of. See, Defam, which strategy should we use against Amazon, and in which strategy to use for ASIN suppressed buy box? Casey, you want to handle that one?
Yeah, so when you're competing with Amazon, Maven will factor that into its general data and analysis for finding that optimal price. So you can definitely use Maven. If you do use
Nice.
a rules-based strategy under the pursuit section, there will be an option for you to price differently when Amazon is your competition, whether they're the lowest FBA offer, whether they're in the buy box. You can price specific or in a specific manner rather against Amazon. So you can use both rules-based or Maven in that scenario. When it comes to suppressed buy boxes, Aura is going to, as a whole, work in the same format, if you will. Under the advanced section of Maven, it's just a checkbox, and under the rules based, it's going to be under that pursuit section for when the buy box becomes suppressed. In the rules based, it's going to default to current price minus 2 cents. That is our best recommendation. And what we typically recommend is that's going to have Aura slowly drop your price by 2 cents until either the buy box is reactivated or your min price is reached. The Maven logic is going to work exactly the same. I can't remember if it is that 2 cent figure or not, but it will slowly drop that price until that min is reached or the buy box is reactivated. When the buy box does reactivate, it'll revert back to the typical strategy settings, whether that's Maven or rules based. And then also on Maven, it does take a note of the price point where that buy box becomes suppressed, just for its own data and analysis for moving forward to kind of inform their pricing decisions there. So you really can use either, and those settings are up to you. But if it is customized price minus by whatever that metric is, it'll slowly drop that price until the min's there or the buy box is activated again.
Nice. Let's see. So yeah, question basically about like the mins. Yeah. So if you're attempting to source at that 30% ROI, that's your buying criteria. Now, having been a seller, that doesn't mean you're always going to get that, right? Like that's where you buy, not necessarily where the market shifts. So I would actually consider lowering that minimum ROI to give it more range. That will most likely increase performance. Or actually, if you have amazing buying, it may not increase performance at all, but it won't hinder it either, which is super important. Okay, so this one gets me excited. It gets my finance bones tingling. So Michael has a question here. He's basically he's taken a Google Sheet file. It's got 2 tabs, and what he's trying to do is pull in data from one to the other. So here's how you're going to do that. I'm actually going to share my screen here. So we're going to do this in real time because this will be fun. Let me actually remove that. And I'll show you exactly how to do this. Cool. Okay, so we got a spreadsheet here. I'm going to create 2 sheets. We'll leave those named here. We're going to assume ASINs are a bunch of numbers. And then I'm just going to do that +1. And I'll explain what I'm doing here in a moment. And we're just going to say this is, what are you trying to pull in here? You're trying to pull in cost. Okay, buy cost. So we're going to say this is going to be buy cost here. So we'll do, actually, we'll say this is SKU, and then this is going to be our buy cost, right? So we're just going to call this 25. And then just to make this unique, we'll do it this way. So let's assume this is the raw file you're dealing with. And hopefully, actually, let me, I'm going to zoom in here so you can actually see what the heck I'm looking at. There we go. Okay, cool. Okay, so we have our SKU and our buy cost. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab these guys here. Actually, I'm going to pull a random one here. So we're just going to pull a random one. I'm going to go over to my sheet 2. We're going to say SKU as well, and then our buy costs. I'm going to put that in here. I'm going to do something called a VLOOKUP. That's the formula you want. So we're going to do a VLOOKUP. VLOOKUP. So the search key is the thing we want to reference. So you mentioned SKU. So I'll use the SKU here, comma, the range. So where am I looking? I'm just going to highlight the whole thing. The index, which index is basically like the column. So 1, 2, 3. So I'm going to look up, I basically want to return the thing in the second one, and is sorted, just default to false here. And then 37. So if I go back over here, look up that, there's my 37 buy cost. So in order to combine information, and what's nice is you can do this a lot of different ways, right? So if you need to pull in like 5 different things, all you would do is change the index of the column data you want to pull in. So this is just a VLOOKUP. It's one of the most useful Excel Google Sheets formulas you could ever learn for combining a bunch of crazy data. And so that's 37. So if this changes, I make it 42. It's 42. So hopefully that solves the question. If it doesn't, let me know. I'm happy to like redo this. But if I read your question correctly, Michael, this is exactly what we were talking about here. So that should help. Thanks, finance degree. The one thing I learned was VLOOKUPs. Actually, my last textbook was Excel Bible 2019. That was my last actual textbook.
Nice. Yeah, I didn't get too deep into the finance courses. I never quite got into the Excel advanced things. I stuck to my communication courses, which has been fun. Has been applicable for the most part.
Yes. Well, it's funny because one of my classes, there's only 12 of us that got in, and that was that textbook. And you got paired up each week. And actually, it wasn't a professor teaching; it was us teaching everybody. So you got assigned a chapter in it, and you had to present it, teach it, answer any questions anybody had, and had to do a project with it. So we got real in depth. It's been a hot minute, obviously, but Excel is absolutely insane, especially doing like discounted cash flow formulas, all kinds of crazy stuff. I remember I was going for an internship, and the application was, here's a broken massive file, go fix it. And it was crazy. It was huge. It took forever to load. Like Google Sheets couldn't take it. It was always Excel. See, Abe, with all the changes in machine learning, AI in recent time, what are the effects, positive or negative, on repricing and selling online in general? I think very positive. The recent changes have mainly been with large language models, which is not what we do. Like that's text generate, or that's really just generation. It's not just text generation, it's image generation, things of that nature. What is interesting to me is if you view large language models as a reasoning machine, which there's been a lot of arguments in favor of this kind of concept, you're able to take what was previously required to be explicit, rigid automation. So if you think Zapier, although Zapier is doing some amazing things with AI, with I think it's called Central now, Zapier Central. They're basically baking in AI into that. You could build these automations, but if one thing was incorrect, it broke the whole thing. So I call that, rigid automation. Now we're getting to something I would call non-rigid automation, meaning it can kind of rationalize or reason through certain problems relatively well. How does that affect repricing? I don't think it immediately does, because again, what we're making decisions, but these are really mathematical decisions. And what's hard is large language models actually suck at math. This is like, they're getting there certainly, but they're not quite there yet. Where I think, AI in its current, focus, which is like these large language models, things like that, is applicable, is anything that your agency's doing, right? So if you're looking at things like listing optimization or SEO for listings, I think a lot of that is text generation, right? It's taking in something, a lot of inputs, understanding the rules, what are the best practices. You can give it all this information that it can learn from and be like, oh, cool, here's what it should be. Great. Perfect. We can automate that. You don't need a VA to do these things. So I think it's going to touch a lot of that. I think it's also going to touch a lot of data analysis, because what it allows you to do is take a huge data set and have a conversation with it. That's kind of interesting. Now, it's still slow, right? And I just mentioned that OpenAI just came out with a brand new model, GPT-4o. O stands for Omni. That is twice as fast as GPT-4. But GPT-4 is still relatively slow. And so you're not going to use that for repricing. We're repricing, especially with Hyperdrive, in less than 10 seconds. It would probably take 10 seconds for it to pull in all the information, understand what's happening, and then be like, I should do X. And honestly, I would not trust the reliability of a large language model to do what we do. It would be inaccurate enough times to where it would be disastrous, in my opinion. Like even if it's wrong 1%, that 1% is a meaningful amount at our scale. But I do think it will be applicable in other areas. You're also seeing a lot of research go back into AI right now in other areas. So this could very much change overnight. It's hard to say right now, but a lot of the focus has been on large language models. So again, I think being able to talk to your data, do certain analyses where it previously would have taken you understanding how to do data analysis, like actual data science, kind of goes out the door for the most part, where now you can just have a conversation. You can dump in a ton of data and be like, hey, I got questions. Great. Here you go. And maybe it can help make some recommendations with some good training and knowledge baked into it. But in terms of how does that affect repricing, I don't think the current models are good enough to actually have an impact for what we do. And AI is a very broad term, right? We talk about this a lot in all the content we do. Like AI is such a massive umbrella. There's so many things inside of that. And large language models, the big focus right now, it's only one subset, which is crazy to consider. You have a lot of optimization algorithms and stuff like that in there as well. See, Abe, is there a way we can access this video recording or previous recordings later? Yes. So if you go to goor.com/office hours, office hours is all together. Scroll down. All the past ones are just there in a library. You click on it, it'll jump you over to StreamYard, and you can watch them. So all these are automatically recorded, all that good stuff. Let's see. So what you say is it would take Maven 3-4 days to learn the ASIN and work efficiently. Not really 3 to 4 days. I'd say that's probably a little bit longer from what I've seen. It depends on the specific listing. So if it's very active, I mean, it could be like a few hours, if not like an hour. If it's a very non-active listing, it could take a few days, certainly. Doesn't mean it's not going to do anything. It's still going to perform and work. It's going to get better as it sees more data. We just need a catalyst, right? We need enough data to be like, all right, cool. We know exactly what's happening here. We can make the right decisions. So it kind of ranges depending on how active a particular SKU is. Let's see, Michael, almost need one more column so it will match with the ASIN because the second tab won't have the SKU. So tab 1 will have SKU plus or slash ASIN and by cost, and tab 2 will have the ASIN and by cost with fees. So then I will have the new line or tab that creates SKU ASIN and by cost with fees. Yeah, so you should still be able to do that with the VLOOKUP. If you're trying to do the by cost plus fees, you can do you basically do 2 VLOOKUPs and then do a sum. So this is where it gets crazy, where you do a sum, a VLOOKUP for the buy costs plus a VLOOKUP for the fees, and then it sums it together. So you can definitely do that. And another good thing, ChatGPT is really good at giving Excel formulas. So actually, and you could, at least the new model, GPT-4o, it's free. It's on the free tier, which is like, I don't understand how they're making money, probably just selling all of our data. It's exactly, there's training on our data. But if you go to ChatGPT and explain exactly, I have, this, I need that, it will basically walk you through exactly how to structure it and the exact formulas for how to do it. And what's cool is, let's say it gets something wrong, you go back and be like, hey, I'm getting in a return or an error on this particular formula, help me fix it. And it'll ask you a few questions. I use that all the time for certain things where I'm just like, kind of forgot how to do that, or I'm like, I conceptually think I know how to do this, but like, what the heck's the formula? Google searching for Excel formulas is just not the funnest thing in the world. So I will actually use I will use ChatGPT to basically give you those formulas. Do this with Python too. I'm just like, I need a Python script that does this. It's like, all right, cool. Here you go. It's pretty great. See, Prince coming in. Love it. Can you title previous office hours videos with a couple of the main topics covered? This would be good for reference if you wanted to go back and find something. We could, something I want to think about because we jump so all over the place because of the fact that it's open. Something we could definitely take a look at, but it's really all over the place. And I've already noticed, Casey, I'm sure you have too, like there's a low level pattern of questions we answer, mins, maxes, things like that. Mm-hmm. How does Maven work? How to approach certain things, optimal pricing, things like that. So there is some consistency. So I'll think about it. We'll see. I wish there was a better way to do it. Casey, maybe you have some ideas.
No, I would agree. It does seem like we cover such a wide range of topics, but there is kind of a similar flavor of some questions that come in and out, obviously with different specifics. But yeah, we'll definitely see if we can maybe come up with trends, or if we intro with a specific topic, maybe we just title it with whatever the intro topic is. But yeah, with it being kind of a come in and ask anything type, it's not like we fully cover specific topics on a regular basis, I guess.
Maybe we could dump the transcripts into ChatGPT and be like, get creative, name this. Yeah. I feel like it's a good way to spend a few hours. Nice. See, great question here. When the listing is inactive, deleted, or sold, is there a way to switch the hyperdrive to another active listing? Is there an easy way or alerts you? So not right now. There's one way we could do this with workflows. I don't really love that concept. I think what makes a lot more sense is something we've talked about previously, which is creating this like autopilot mode for Hyperdrive. So instead of you having to go in and decide which listings need however many credits you have, we could go in at some interval, let's call it an hour, scan the SKUs and say which ones really need those in number of credits. And we'll basically rebalance it in real time. So we would basically do that for you in that scenario. We would just say, cool, it's inactive. It doesn't need it anymore. Toggle it off. This other one needs it more. So again, kind of creating more that technical leverage that we like to talk about, right? Like creating features that allow you to say, here's one click, you do all that crazy complex stuff for me. I don't need to deal with it. 1,000%. So that's something we're looking at as well. Nice. Awesome. We got about 10 minutes here. So we'll start to wrap up for time, but we got that 10 minutes for any additional questions or ideas, feedback, anything that anybody has. And we appreciate everybody making the time to join. It's always exciting for Casey and I when we have a bunch of people on here and we get to have a more consistent conversation. So appreciate everybody's time. See, Prince, yeah, ask ChatGPT to do it. That's going to be the new, just Google it, you know. That's ChatGPT. 1,000%.
Dylan,
love it.
I think if you scroll up a little bit, I think Ali had a question around like pausing pricing and a strategy there.
Nice.
Not sure if we handled that one. I think we might have missed it.
Not.
But Ali, I think you might be more so looking for what we call a workflow. So essentially what you can do with the workflow, and we do have a specific help article for this. I believe it's like if you search how to pause your listings at a specific time. But essentially you can set up a pause repricing workflow that will pause your listings for 15, 20, an hour, however long you want it to be paused. And you can set it to a specific price, whether it's the current price plus $2, for example. You can have it set to your max price, but essentially once that pause ends, or will resume repricing from whatever price point you were at. So if it was your max or current price plus a few dollars, that's just a good way, for lack of a better word, if your listings get stale at a specific price. Granted, that would just be due to your strategy settings and whatnot, but that's a good way to kind of make sure that Maven is still operating and your regular rules-based strategies are kind of operating as they should. Not that they would not be, but some folks like to do that overnight, kind of pause it at midnight for 15 minutes to kind of reset it going into the next day. So you'll want to set that up in the workflow section.
Nice. Yeah. Thank you for grabbing that one.
Yeah, no worries. No worries.
See, Abe, not a question related to repricing. What's your tech stack? I like when technical people jump in. We are primarily Go on the back end, React, TypeScript on the front, and then a few different tools for workflow orchestration and stuff like that. Obviously, I won't share everything, but just at a high level. Which is why, by the way, when I said it took us like 18 months to rebuild Aura, we didn't just port things over. We actually went from a Node backend, so rewrote every line of code into Go, re-architected everything, remodeled everything. So like it was a lot of work. Part of what took a lot of that time was re-architecting and remodeling, right? And this again is why I keep highlighting that our team, we hire software engineers, not developers. Like your developers are not going to jump in and do system design. They're not going to do architecture. Especially anything at our scale. So, we have software engineers on the team that are able to actually do these things at a very high level and understand what are the trade-offs of every single thing, what language really makes the most sense. Although you can do anything with any language, there are languages that are better suited for certain types of systems, and making sure that we're well positioned from that perspective, as well as the cost. A lot of what we do is very costly. For a lot of people that don't know, a lot of your software is what's called CRUD, C-R-U-D. So it's basically create, retrieve. I had to think about that for a second. Retrieve, update, and delete. And it's basically just a big database, a web front end, and you go, I'm going to do one of these 4 things. That's not incredibly complicated, actually, but what we do is very resource processing intensive, right? We're processing a lot of information as fast as possible. And so because of that, how we make certain decisions could either grind things to a halt or enable us to go 10 times further. And so having an actual computer science trained engineer be able to come in and be like, cool, like here's the trade-offs we're going to make. Here's how I can reduce latency in these different layers of the system. That really comes to fruition. I mean, that's the whole reason why Hyperdrive as a feature itself exists. If we just outsource this to a bunch of developers, Hyperdrive would never existed because there would be nobody looking that deep at the system and be like, wait a second, there's something here Let me go deeper into the documentation. Let me experiment over here. Oh, we could do that. Here's where we have to stop doing it. There's a technical limitation at 50 SKUs for each account. Okay, cool. Great. Let's go build it now, right? Like that's before you even write code. That's what I keep saying. Like writing the code is actually the easy part. It's understanding how that, what is the right code to write, and how does that influence other systems in our system? Because we have a collection of systems. It's not just one big, massive code file, So a lot of what we do is very complex. I've had to learn a lot as a non-technical co-founder, that's for sure. And still learning a ton every single day, of course. Nice. So, Casey, anything you want to wrap up with here?
Nothing's top of mind. I mean, if anyone has any topics or things specifically that they want us to cover, whether it's at a high level or more in depth next week, definitely feel free to come into chat, whether it's comments now or chat between now and next office hours. As Dylan did mention, we may not have office hours next week as he may be en route to the Proven conference. So if you need any live office hours help, feel free to chat in or go visit him at the Proven conference. But that's everything that's top of mind for me. Nothing really ringing any bells at the moment.
Awesome. Well, with that, I think we're going to go ahead and wrap up for the time. Again, we appreciate everybody joining. This is always fun for us to do. We're seeing the numbers consistently grow every single week that we do office hours. We track everything. So the data has been looking really good. So we appreciate everybody making the time, especially, people like Prince who are showing up like every week. Appreciate you. Really exciting for us. So with that, we'll let you get back to the rest of your week. And again, if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to our support. We're happy to do an onboarding session with you, give you resources, just help you troubleshoot anything that you may be dealing with or seeing or need help with. We're very accessible. It's either gonna be Casey, Finn, or myself jumping in. So you'll see a friendly face, certainly, not just a random name and an email address in the Philippines. I'm very proud to say that. So with that, we will let everybody get back to the rest of their week. And thank you so much. All right, bye guys.
Adios.